Hi everyone, I am correspondent Matt Finn coming at you live from very cold Minneapolis. I'm in one of our producers' cars right now just to escape the elements, but we have been outside a lot. Although today's a little more mild. Today's like a whole couple degrees instead of negative. So once again, a lot going on here in Minneapolis. Things are really getting politically dicey. Tom Homan, the border czar, was here yesterday. He had meetings with Governor Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Frey. Afterwards, Homan, Walz, and Frey all released statements. Tom Homan said, in part, that the feds and the state and local governments still do not agree on everything. Governor Walz kind of gave a little more of a neutral response, but said he made it clear that he wants an investigation into the federal agents involved in the death of Brene Good, Alex Preddy, and then also the third shooting here. And then Mayor Frey probably gave them the most definitive response and said, we had a good meeting, but we are not going to cooperate with federal immigration law. Well, we wake up this morning, President Trump posts on Truth Social that Mayor Frey is, quote, playing with fire based on his response that he's not going to enforce federal immigration law. Then Mayor Frey responds and said, my police are not here to enforce federal immigration law. I want someone in my city to call 911 and feel safe. They're not your troopers. Since then, the White House has responded and said, we are not asking you to enforce federal immigration law. We are simply asking you to detain the criminals that are in your possession so that we could take it from here, potentially deport these guys. So that's where all this stands. So there's movement, yes. Is there progress? I guess we'll wait and see. I think the one very open-ended thing is, Governor Walz did not definitively say, by the way, if you guys have any questions, feel free to text us or message us in this chat. Governor Walz did not definitively say, we're not cooperating with the detainers. We're not cooperating with any of President Trump's requests. The president and the White House have put out, a few bullet points of how the chaos here can de-escalate. I think the key sticking point is cooperating with the detainers. DHS says there's more than 1,300 detainer requests for criminal illegal aliens in this state that the state is not cooperating with. So we'll see. We'll see if Governor Walz gives any leeway to the federal government or if he's going to keep fighting them. It seems like Mayor Frey wants nothing to do with it. And the city council here is extremely, extremely progressive and left-leaning. So Mayor Frey probably is calculating this and says, I don't want to lose a job. And if I ever leave this office, I may want to work in the private sector here, and I don't want to be the guy who caved to Trump. Question is, who actually has the final whistle, Washington or Mayor Frey? That's a great question. We see this all over the country in these sanctuary cities and states where ultimately it seems like the federal government cannot be everywhere at once. So if a municipality or if a city is in possession of a criminal that the federal government wants, it seems like the final whistle oftentimes is in the hand of the local officials and the state officials. They do have to hold that person so that they can hand them off to the federal government. I've covered so many stories where people who are repeat offenders, very serious crimes, and, places like Chicago let them go. So I think it really does. I think that the local and state officials have to comply. They have to cooperate. Because again, there's DHS and the federal government only has so much manpower. They can't be everywhere at once. They cannot possibly be detaining hundreds, if not thousands of people in every state. So that's a great question. Tom Homan said that they had very productive meetings here yesterday. That is a remarkable difference compared to Gregory Bavino, who was is still DHS chief. The locals here, they did not work well with Bavino. They viewed him as too aggressive, too in your face. I don't think there were any meetings with Bavino and Walz and Frey where they all left and said, we're all kind of gaining some ground here. Homan, different story. I see someone may be commenting here. Also, as far as the protests go, yesterday, after all my live hits in the morning and in the afternoon, I went out to the designated protest site at the federal government, the federal building. There's only a handful of protesters there, dramatically different from just a couple days or weeks ago when you'd have so many very angry people there. Have other mayors and other cities seen a shift or change in behavior over this? I don't know. I don't know that anybody who defined themselves as a sanctuary city has switched. I can't think of any major ones. I know Memphis. My producer Madeline is saying Memphis, maybe.
They went in for the crime.
They went in. Okay. They accepted it. Okay. There you go. There's one. Maybe you guys know of others. But I think, some of the key places like California, Chicago, Minneapolis, no. No. And it's a shame. It really is a shame because I've covered some crazy stories where people wanted for some really serious stuff, repeat offenders on all types of crimes, and they're just let go. Now, I see another question or another comment coming in. One thing you'll hear Governor Walz say is, no, we do hand people over, but my understanding is that is after they've already been tried and convicted in this state. Then they'll say, okay, fine, you have them. The federal government is really specifying here, we want people who are, actively wanted for crimes, people who are, just committed stuff recently or perhaps years ago, but we still want them. It doesn't matter whether they've gone through the judicial system or not. So that's a big disagreement there. In general, things I think are calming down here. We have not seen any like little riots or flare-ups happen. Another question is, have citizens continued to get arrested that are attacking law enforcement? Well, they did out in Maple Grove the other night, which is a suburb. The protesters there, I think it was Sunday night, they surrounded the hotel where they thought Greg Bavino was staying. And Maple Grove said, not here, man. They said, we play ball with the state and federal law enforcement. So there was like 26 arrests there. Since then, I haven't seen anything that's been deemed unlawful. Like there hasn't been a protest turned right. There was a protest last night at the state capitol. There's definitely protests happening outside of the federal building, but they're remaining pretty organized. They haven't been deemed unlawful, I don't think. So I'm not aware of any major arrests since Sunday night. But that was notable because I think that showed these protesters something, which is in the city of Minneapolis, you may get away with it for a while. But, out in the suburbs where people cooperate with the state and the feds, you're not gonna. Another question coming in. So, while we wait for the other question, things fairly calm here. Getting a little bit warmer. Like the wind chills were like -20, -30. How has the energy shifted with Homan and federal law enforcement? Yeah, like I'm saying, I think things are quieter here now with Homan. Homan is known to have very different tactics from Greg Bavino. And we saw the mayor and the governor say, we had productive meetings with Homan. No one blasted each other. Now, are they all going to come together and agree on stuff, and are they going to work together? We'll see. But the energy seems, to be becoming a little more synchronized. But we'll wait and see. With Bavino, he is a sector chief in California. He really put his name on the map out in Los Angeles, where he did a lot of highly visual raids. I was a part of one of them where they were in a Penske truck and pulled into a Home Depot. The thing went viral. It's really historic if you think about it. But so it was kind of like a Trojan horse. These agents loaded into a Penske truck, pulled into a Home Depot parking lot, busted out there. Bavino was doing stuff like that. I also did a ride along with Border Patrol here. They were, doing roving patrols where they would, stop and question people on the streets. I don't know if that's how Homan's going to operate. It seems like Homan's going to be a little more focused on targeted enforcement. So also seems like, in general, the Trump administration might scale back on some of this stuff that a lot of people just don't agree with. Even though the Supreme Court ruled it legal, there was a lawsuit in California, alleging racial discrimination, all types of unlawful tactics. And the Supreme Court said what Border Patrol was doing was legal. So Bavino was only, following the law and following his instructions. But unfortunately, it went sour here with the shootings and the deaths. Are there risks that could result from DHS cracking down on Minnesota? Well, I would say DHS has been cracking down because they've been, doing all these enforcements. Maybe you can clarify, are there risks that could result from DHS cracking down? I think probably a lot of the risks have already been taken, and we've seen, unfortunately, some of the side effects. as far as cracking down moving forward, it seems like that would have to be more like policy crackdowns, where the states and the feds agree on crackdowns, because DHS has certainly already done it their way in the streets. We got another question coming in. Maybe not. Okay, so last night, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, she was holding a town hall here, and it was her first one of the year, and there was a lot of attention on it because she, was, I think the title literally had the word like terrorism in it, referring to ICE. So obviously she was coming guns a-blazing to that town hall. We had a crew there. Everyone was interested. And then at some point, actually right as she said that DHS Secretary Kristi Noem should resign or face impeachment, some man got up from the audience and squirted Congresswoman Omar with liquid out of a syringe. That man has been identified. He's been arrested and charged. So that was a really scary moment. I know people have a lot of different opinions on this online. And you are free to express your opinions on my social media and Fox's social media. But, given how tense everything is, you do wonder what was running through the Congresswoman's mind and everyone around her when someone approaches the podium with their hand up. Is there an investigation on if the anti-ICE protests have been funded? Is there an update on that investigation? The feds are looking into so many aspects of all this. They are actively looking into the St. Paul Church storming. They've already arrested some people there. My understanding is that investigation's not over. They're not done by any means, so keep an eye on that. Will that reveal funding? Because keep in mind, some of the people arrested are basically lifelong demonstrators here, people, community organizers. So could the feds learn about funding or organization from St. Paul? Possibly. Also, there were a bunch of arrests. So the second shooting, when an agent defended himself, according to DHS, and shot a man who was hitting him with a shovel. While that happened, a bunch of people broke into federal cars, you may recall, and they stole, I believe, a gun. They stole a bunch of documents. Well, there's a big investigation into that. And I would also tell you to keep your eye on that investigation, because I would imagine that all those people who broke into the cars, their background and their connections and possible funding is being investigated. All their communications are being investigated. So that's two investigations where the feds can learn a lot more about what's going on. And then, all the other people that were arrested, perhaps the locals or feds will get some information out of them. So what I can tell you is, based on our experience here, is that there is a very organized anti-ICE, anti-Trump network. We've been talking about it for weeks now. It's documented. We've experienced it in many ways. I don't know, I don't know how funded it has to be anymore, because, for example, I talked to a protester yesterday at the federal building, and he said, our church is now being protected by police. I don't think so. No, that's not a citywide thing. And I aimed to get over to the St. Paul Church on Sunday, the week anniversary, but I had live shots with Fox and Friends, so I wasn't over there. But although we did reach out to that church for comment a lot, and they really haven't gotten back to us, which I understand. But I don't know. Yes. Yep. So also, Border Patrol agents involved in the Alex Preddy shooting have been placed on administrative leave. Border Patrol, or DHS, tells us that's standard, and that really is standard. I mean, whenever you see an officer involved shooting, almost always they're placed on some type of leave. But here about the funding. I have covered a lot of protests and riots in Minneapolis. We have seen people come from outside of the city and state. We have seen, busloads of people come and go. So obviously there's funding somewhere. But, when I talk to some protesters at the designated protest site, these are people who are showing up every day or nearly every day to protest federal agents here. The one guy I talked to said he has no income coming in because he's not working. He said, I'm willing to lose my income for how many days or weeks I have to be here because I want to be here. He goes, he said, other people I'm talking to here are taking vacation time. They're not working in general. I guess they have the option not to do that. This is what they say. And I said, look, straight up, and this is on camera, I said, there are people who claim that some of you guys are paid here. And he said, no, he said, most of us have the ability to not be called into work every day, or not working 9 to 5s. Those are his words, not mine. The other thing too is, as far as the signal chats, like a lot of this is, it's seemingly, and Madeline, you can correct me if I'm wrong, or producer Madeline's in the car. It seems like it's kind of like grassroots, people who are very convicted by this. They are activists, and they just give a lot of time to it. And they created this little format where they have emojis for who's doing what. And I think a lot of people are figuring their way around how work hours, are doing it after work, are not working, because there's a lot of people who, you well know, despise the Trump administration, despise ICE up here. So there's people who have dedicated their lives to this, basically at this point, seemingly. So I don't know how much funding it really takes, because all it takes is people with their cell phones, blah, 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 But don't get me wrong. Could there be outside funding? Absolutely. Could there be outside organizing? Absolutely. We are, every time I can, I ask people about it. I try to look into it. But in general, it seems like a lot of this is pretty grassroots, and people who just will stop at nothing to trail Border Patrol, to protest, to impede, to whatever they can. I mean, even look at Alex Preddy. I mean, I believe he was a nurse, and he was out there, right? So this is a guy who's well educated and has, a very great job, and he's still on the streets, So it's really case by case. But look, I mean, the background to Minneapolis is extremely progressive, extremely liberal, at least within the city. I mean, this goes all the way back to prior to George Floyd. And so when stuff like this develops, all the activists here, seize on it, and they rise to their occasion, and they come together. That's just the sentiment. It's the culture, and we've seen it over and over again. Don't forget, this is the city that led the defund the police movement, right? I mean, they were in Powderhorn Park, which is now a notable place, and they said, we're going to dismantle and defund the police. Right, that was 2020, and shortly afterwards, many cities tried, and it failed miserably. So that's the culture here, and that's the politics here. So when something like this happens, the organized networks they're gonna show their faces. And another question, a comment: the standoff between the White House and Minneapolis has reached a critical fever pitch as Mayor Frey holds his ground on the city's separation ordinance. With the president labeling this defiance as a serious violation of the law, the clash over federal authority versus local sanctuary policies is setting a massive precedent for urban governance. I think the precedent's already there. I mean, they already are not cooperating. Sanctuary cities, how many are there? I think the Department of Homeland Security has even identified how many dozens of sanctuary jurisdictions there are within the country. I don't think Frey saying we're not going to cooperate is any more of a precedent. This has been going on for quite some time. He's just doubling down on it, And of course, the president's going to call him out because they've been going back and forth. But yeah, so my understanding is that the federal government can defund sanctuary cities. There is a way when it comes to federal funding. If you do not cooperate with federal law, there are ways to defund. I heard Dana Perino talking about this the other day, and also Trey Gowdy. And I had a federal source explain this to me, but I believe there's ways, like if the federal government wants to, they can defund some of these cities, saying like if you're not going to comply with the law, then you're not going to get X amount of funding. So could we see that happen? I mean, that card has been talked about a lot. Is the federal government going to play it? We'll see. So places like Minneapolis, places like Los Angeles, Chicago, these super sanctuary jurisdictions, I think the precedent is already there, for this urban government, to answer your question. And here's the thing. I was at the border for 2.5 years. My producer Madeline in the car was as well, 3 years. So I witnessed countless number, tens of thousands, maybe probably hundreds of thousands of people cross into the United States. Many of them were good people. They wanted a better life. Most of the people who you see surrender in the daytime, they're here to work. But, I did ride-alongs, overnight ride-alongs. And oh my gosh, we covered it endlessly about the people who would illegally cross into the country, the gotaways. So that open border for so many years has led us to where we are now. So that was the ultimate precedent, right? I mean, that led to all this. We all know people were legally crossing before for many years. But, that surge, that unprecedented surge, and then the response, all the Democratic response of, no, they're here to stay, that's what we're seeing now. And President Trump won on the mandate that he is going to carry out, the biggest mass deportation in history. And they're still in the middle of that. But, some things in Minneapolis went very wrong here. There are people that are dead. And so it looks like the Trump administration is re-strategizing. They are, as a matter of fact, because, Pavino was pretty much the lead and he's gone. And now Tom Homan's here. And we'll see. But anyways, thank you guys for listening to me babble on. I'm on live on Fox News at 1:15. And I appreciate you asking questions and listening to us. And I hope you have a great day and stay warm. I'm correspondent Matt Finn. I put a lot of updates on my X and on my Instagram. We shoot a lot of video on our cell phones that you may not end up seeing on air, but it does end up on Fox's social media. So check all that out. And God bless you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.